When it comes to pre-emerge herbicides in corn, there are a lot of different ways you can apply them, a lot of different timings. We just want to kind of talk through this a little bit because here's the whole thing. You're going to invest money in a corn pre. We want to make sure you get the most out of your investment.
All right, first of all, application timing is just really critical. So let's talk through some of the most common timings that can be done. Let's start with pre-plant incorporated. So we're putting it out there ahead of planting and we're going to till the soil to do it. Now there are a couple of moving parts here. When you think about the products that you're going to use, do they have to be tilled in immediately? Like the old Eradicane that we used to use back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah, that had to get incorporated right away. So we'd have to put a spray nozzle on the front of our tillage tool to be able to accomplish that. Then the question is, which tillage tool can you use to get the most out of your pre-herbicide?
Usually the tillage tool of choice is the field cultivator, but the big thing here is we want you to go fast. With most of these products, let's take Dual, Triple Flex, Outlook, Harness, Surpass, Balance Flex, any of these things, they're shoot inhibitors. In other words, if that weed is germinating in the top inch, the shoot of the weed is definitely in the top inch of soil, so you want to keep it relatively shallow. But it will absolutely take less rain to get the product working if you have that product tilled in. So what you want to do is go very fast. I often tell people run 7 to 8 miles an hour with the field cultivator, and they'll go, whoa, I can't even cover the tire tracks with that. And then I usually respond by saying, oh, so you're telling me you don't have extensions on the shanks behind where your wheels run. Well, that's the first thing you need to do. So basically you're setting the shanks a little deeper, a little lower, right where your wheels are. That way you don't have to run the whole implement deeper. So the idea is you want to keep the tillage down to roughly a couple inches deep, which means the herbicide would be about 1 inch deep.
Now let's say you have some deep tillage to do. You have some compaction out there, you have some ruts, you have some stalks you have to bury. Do that first. If you're going to be applying one of these pre-herbicides for corn, you have to get the deep tillage out of the way, and you have to make sure if you're coming back with the second pass that you don't have any big ruts. You don't want any big spots where that herbicide is going to drop down a few inches deep. Otherwise, you're going to end up with streaks out in the field and poor control from your herbicide.
One of the things that some people will do is they'll put the spray nozzles in the middle of the field cultivator in that case. So they've already started to level the ground, then they spray the herbicide, then they've got the rest of the field cultivator and maybe a harrow behind or something like that. But even if you run a drag across the field, just anything to get that herbicide in the ground, even just a little bit, that means it takes a little less moisture. So I'll often tell people, you know, you'll hear some of these reps say, oh, it only takes a ½ inch of rain to activate our product. And then the next guy goes, well, it only takes a ¼ inch of rain to activate ours. Look, all these things are going to be activated with almost no rain. But I don't just want activation. I want 100% control. Well, you're not going to get 100% control with a ½ inch of rain. No way. You got to probably have 1 inch or 2 of rain, or you have to till that herbicide in, and then it just takes a little bit of soil moisture or a little bit of rain because the herbicide is already in the right spot. Now you just have to get it into the weed.
All right, so if we're going to go just pre-emerge and we're not going to do any incorporation, you've got that choice of, do I want to do it really early so I have more time to catch a rain? This is something we'd advise if we're in drier climates. Get that herbicide out early. Now you got a couple of weeks or more to hopefully catch some moisture to move it into the soil. Or if you're in an area that's blessed with rain, hey, I get 1 inch of rain every week. Oh, okay, well go ahead and plant then, and you can spray after you plant and let the rain work it down in. Now, one of the considerations you may have is, how much soil am I moving with the planter? Because if you put the herbicide out before planting, you don't want to clean that whole row out and all of a sudden you've got a strip right in the row that has no herbicide because you pushed it all to the side.
One of the other things that you have to keep in mind here is there are different things you can use as the carrier. You don't just have to use water. You could also use fertilizer. This is something we commonly do in our operation. We might go half and half. Maybe it's half fertilizer and half water, something like that. If you do go half and half, you generally have that chemical mixing in there a little bit easier. So it all depends on what you want to do, but all I can tell you is it's a pretty good way to go if you're putting, let's say, liquid nitrogen, like 32%, or maybe even ammonium thiosulfate as the carrier out there. So now you're fertilizing and you're controlling weeds at the same time.
Now when you're doing that, if you're putting fertilizer out, you're going to be using higher volumes. And higher volumes are fine for getting good coverage with that pre. When we're using liquid pre's and we're spraying them out in the field, we can get pretty good coverage, and it doesn't take a huge amount of gallons or the tiniest of droplets. Just watch what's happening behind your sprayer. Make sure you're getting adequate coverage to get good control. This is one of the huge advantages versus impregnating these pre's on dry fertilizers. We're not big on that practice because think about how many pellets are going to be out in your field. Well, here's a pellet, and a few inches over, here's another pellet. Well, you can't have a drop of herbicide here and then no other drop for a few inches. You're going to have problems with weeds popping up in between.
There are a lot of great pre-emerge herbicides out there, but there is one product we do not want you to use ever, and that's Atrazine. Now don't get us wrong, Atrazine is a nice product. It does a great job helping to control a bunch of weeds, but the problem with Atrazine is it can leach. And the trouble with pre-emerge applications is that's where a lot of the Atrazine that ends up in groundwater, well, that's where it comes from, is a pre. So save your Atrazine, use it post-emerge, or don't use it at all.
Well, the other thing with Atrazine is if you do put it out there, it really limits what your crop options are. So let's just say, for example, your corn gets hailed out, or all of a sudden you had that herbicide out and you just can't get back in the field. You got too much rain. Now you want to switch to soybeans and you just put Atrazine out and you can't. So it's a good thing to save that Atrazine for a later application.
Well, once again, we want you to get the most out of your pre-emerge herbicide investment. Pre's are incredibly important. If you're in a drier area of the country, it will help you to very lightly incorporate these pre's. You'll get better performance that way. Otherwise, you could spray the pre really early. In a wetter area of the country, certainly you could spray after planting if you want to. It's just you've got to have rain. These are not products that are going to have a lot of pullback on great big weeds that emerge. You have to get the weed before it gets out of the ground. That's where you get the best performance.
Well, pre-emerge herbicides may be important for our Weed of the Week as well. We'll show you which ones will work the best coming up next.